Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman gave up studying happiness. Why did he give up studying that? I'll dive into that in this video, in this exploration of what we mean by happiness. I'll explore, one, why happiness is such a slippery topic and phrase to nail down, and what are some of the elements that lead to happiness or better ways to understand it. Two, I'll dive into a better alternative to happiness, meaning, and what might lead to meaning in our lives. And three, I'll explore the role and some of the misconceptions we have of happiness in the modern world, and how that leads people astray, and how we might get past that. There are many different ways to measure happiness. You've probably seen one of the most famous graphs of happiness, which charts happiness against GDP. This would seem to suggest that the more money you have, the happier you are. There's other famous research showing that once you earn more than $70,000, happiness seems to flatline. There's also happiness curves showing that happiness dips in midlife and then peaks again in old age. These are all great, except many different researchers and academics and people who talk about happiness in public all have different definitions of what they mean by happiness. And our own definitions of what happiness means to us vary so widely across culture and across families and across regions that it leads to this enormous challenge that we can't really talk or compare across many of these charts and ideas, or even across ages in these charts of what we really mean by happiness. This is why Daniel Kahneman famously gave up studying happiness. He said, "People don't want to be happy the way I've defined the term. What I experience here and now, it is much more important for them to be satisfied, to experience life satisfaction from the perspective of what I remember, of the story they tell about their lives." What he's saying here is happiness is really the narrative or the story we give ourselves. And where does that come from? Some of this is innate. Twin studies have shown that up to a third of our orientation or affect towards the world is determined by genetics. This is crazy, but it's also not that crazy once we start to look at some of the long-term data on happiness. For example, if you look at this long-range data over the last 50 years of the United States and look at the people that are very happy and not very happy, it's pretty consistent over time. So, is there anything we can really do to impact our happiness? One alternative is to think about meaning. Meaning is a much deeper topic and doesn't always correlate or get confused with what we sometimes pair happiness with, which is pleasurable emotions. Meaning often is aligned with things that are unpleasurable, difficult challenges in our life. A fascinating study from the University of Sussex looked at people's relationship to their work and the meaning they derived from it. They found an interesting thing, which was that meaning was not tied to experiences of joy. Instead, what they found was that meaning was associated with mixed, uncomfortable, or even painful thoughts and feelings, not just a sense of unalloyed joy and happiness. They found 5 factors that influenced how meaningful an experience was likely to be. These included having an impact on others, a poignant experience, an episodic experience, a very discrete moment in time. Upon reflection, it was something you actually had to pause and think about. It was holistic. It was part of a broader story, as we talked about. The takeaway Kahneman had was that happiness was really part of a broader story and narrative we have of our lives. Gretchen Rubin famously figured this out when she took a year of her life to try and figure out what the heck was happiness all about. One of her profound insights was similar to the research we just talked about, was that the things that go wrong often make the best memories. Close your eyes and just hit pause or think for a second. What are some powerful memories in your past that stand out? They're a little more nuanced than what we traditionally think of as happiness. So many people say that the goal of their life is to be happy, but they can't really provide a definition of happiness that aligns with the things that actually matter in their life. Despite knowing these things, meaning is not really something you can just manufacture. One of my favorite writers, Maria Popova, talking about the lessons she was digesting from reading hundreds, if not thousands, of wise people writing across several centuries, said this.
I mean, the true material of knowledge is meaning, and the meaningful is the opposite of the trivial. And the only thing that we sort of glean by skimming and skipping forward is really trivia. And the only way to glean knowledge is contemplation, and the road to that is time. There's nothing else. It's just time. There is no shortcut for the conquest of meaning. And ultimately, it is meaning that we seek to give to our lives.
Maria rightly realizes that meaning is what we're talking about when we're talking about happiness. We want this meaning, but we try to shortcut it with a modern understanding of what happiness is. So why do we get so confused in the modern world? Oftentimes we're looking for shortcuts. We're looking for what other people do and where other people are getting approval. Often this comes in our work. We look for extrinsic markers of success and assume that once we reach these, we will achieve some level of happiness. However, over and over and over again, the people that reach those goals are screaming back at us saying, it's not as good as you look. There's better ways. You need to think deeper if you really want this goal that you're chasing. Kevin Durant is a recent example of this. Here's what Steve Nash reported after talking to Kevin after he won a championship. Kevin was searching for what it all meant. He thought a championship would change everything, and he found out it doesn't. He was not fulfilled. He's since gone on to chart his own path and try to find this meaning in other places, but we see this over and over again. We have examples like Andrew Luck in the NFL walking away, and people like Chamath in the tech world who turn around and say, it's not worth it. The way we're behaving, the goals we're seeking after, it's not all it's cut out to be.
People would say, charismatic guy, interesting guy, funny guy, married, 3 beautiful kids, living in the most expensive zip code in the United States, blah, blah, blah. And I was so confused about what it took to make me happy. And I was getting increasingly confused every day. And so the cycle was, maybe it's more deals, maybe it's more money, maybe it's more vacations, maybe it's a fancier vacation, maybe it's I fly on a better plane, maybe it's a nicer pair. It just kept escalating, but at the end of it, I was emptier and emptier.
This is at the heart of what we're talking about and why people get so confused in the modern world. They're searching for belonging, they're searching for love, they're searching for connection. They want to be part of something that's bigger than themselves, and they want to be part of something that fits with a cohesive and coherent narrative of their own lives. We might really be talking about something the Greeks called eudaimonia, and this was closer to something that might be described as thriving in one's life. I want to close with a quote from Viktor Frankl, who wrote about his experience surviving the Holocaust in World War II. And he wrote about this disconnect he was seeing in his time. He said most attempt to find guidance in conformity and conventionality, but it becomes increasingly difficult to avoid facing the fact that we now have the freedom and the responsibility to make our own choices in life, to find our own meaning. And this is one of the most profoundly difficult things to do in the modern world, is to find happiness, to find that ancient, really substance-rich experience of happiness, something probably closer to the Greek conception or what we call meaning today. Because there are so many traps in the modern world, so many things hung in front of us, so many markers of status and success that confuse us. We probably have to carve our own path. We probably have to take our own route. And that's just hard. But ultimately, this is worth it. And over again, throughout history, people have told us this is the stuff that matters to our lives.